I have two sits of the week for week 15, and the first one is, unfortunately, Jacoby Brissett. He's been one of the most consistent fantasy quarterbacks since becoming a starter in week 6 with so many top 12 performances, but this week he faces the best defense in the league. The Texans have allowed 11.2 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. That's the fewest in the NFL. And they held the top 2 fantasy quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, to 8.1 points and 6.3 points respectively over the last 3 weeks. The two quarterbacks combined for 0 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions in those games. The Texans have not allowed a top 12 fantasy quarterback on the season, and Brissett's chances of bucking that trend are very slim. On top of the matchup itself, I think this may finally be a week that Brissett won't benefit from that negative game script that he's been so used to seeing. Only 4 teams have spent more time trailing than the Cardinals since Brissett's first start in week 6. And since that first start, Brissett has averaged 20.5 fantasy points per game. But 14.8 of that 20.5 has been while the Cardinals are trailing. Meanwhile, the Texans are middle of the pack when it comes to percentage of drives that end in points. So weirdly enough, I think the Texans defense and offense is actually a bad matchup for Brissett in week 15. The second of my 2 sits this week is Breece Hall, who's going against the Jaguars. A lot of this is about the matchup, but I should start with what's going on with the Jets. Over their last 8 games, the Jets have topped 14 points just twice. In addition to the lack of points recently, it's been tough for the Jets all season just to reach the red zone. They reached the red zone on just 31 offensive drives this season, which is tied for the second fewest in the NFL. And Breece Hall managers have really felt this all season long. Breece has just 4 goal line rush attempts and 3 rushing touchdowns all season. Almost all of his fantasy points have been by way of scrimmage yards. However, this doesn't bode well for Hall this week, as the Jaguars have allowed the fewest rush yards per game to running backs this season. And Hall has reached 80 scrimmage yards in just 1 of his last 4 games. With the poor stretch that Hall has been on, and the Jaguars allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the position over the last 4 weeks, I'll be keeping Hall on the bench on teams that I can afford to do so.